I want to thank you very much for your service, Ms. Yates, from beginning to end, your distinguished career as a prosecutor. And I just was putting this timetable together, and I realized that your second meeting, when you went over to the White House to warn them of General Flynn's lying and his connections with Russia, was the same day that this refugee order came out, and it was the same day that you had to leave the Justice Department. So when did you meet with the White House counsel on that day?
I met with White House counsel, best I can recall, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 30th.
And during that meeting, did anyone mention that this refugee order was about to come out to the acting Attorney General of the United States?
No, and that was one thing that was of concern to us, is that not only was department leadership not consulted here, and beyond department leadership, really the subject matter experts, the national security experts, not only was the department not consulted, we weren't even told about it. And I learned about this from media reports.
So you learned about it after the meeting at the White House counsel from the media?
Right.
And then it's true that during your hearing, then Senator Sessions, now the Attorney General, actually asked you if the views the President wants to execute are unlawful, should the Attorney General or Deputy Attorney General say no? And what did you say?
And I said, yes, the Attorney General should. Okay.
And then, moving forward here, as was mentioned by Senator Durbin, this order was after a lawsuit from the state of Washington and Minnesota. The court basically challenged the constitutionality of the order. The order is not taken effect, but what I want to get to right now is the fact that the administration then withdrew its request for an appeal of the court ruling blocking implementation of the same order, and then they changed the order that you would not implement. Is
right, and there were a number of important distinctions between Travel Ban 1 and Travel Ban 2. At the time I had to make my decision, for example, the executive order still applied to green card holders, lawful permanent residents, and those who had visas. There were a number of other distinctions as well. And look, let me say one thing.
I want to get on to
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead, very quickly.
Look, I understand that, people of goodwill and who are good folks can make different decisions about this. I understand that, but all I can say is that I did my job the best way I knew how. I looked at this EO, I looked at the law, I talked with the folks at the Department of Justice, gathered them all to get their views and their input, and I did my job.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let's go to Russia. December 29th, this is the date that actually Senator Graham and I were with Senator McCain hearing about Russian interference, meeting with leaders in the Baltics, Georgia, and Ukraine. This is the date that the President expanded the sanctions against Russia, and this is the date that Michael Flynn reportedly talked to the Russians perhaps several times about sanctions. He then went on to not tell the truth to the Vice President. And one of the White House officials has described the notification that you provided warning them of this as a heads up. How would you describe a heads up?
Well, at the risk of trying to characterize it, I mean, we were there to tell the White House about something we were very concerned about and emphasized to them repeatedly it was so that they could take action.
That was much more formal than just a simple, hey, this is happening. Michael Flynn did not resign his position as National Security Advisor until February 13th. That is 18 days after you went over there with the formal warning. And in particular, after they knew about this on January 28th, Flynn was allowed to join President Trump on an hour-long telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Do you have any doubt that the information that you conveyed to the White House on January 26th should have been made clear that Flynn had been potentially compromised by Russia, that this information was clear?
Well, the purpose in our telling them, again, was so that they could act and so that they could convey that information. So I would hope that they did.
If a high-ranking national security official is caught on tape with a foreign official saying one thing in private and then caught in public saying another thing to the vice president, is that material for blackmail?
Certainly.
Do you want to add anything to that, Director Clapper?
No.
Okay. I think it's pretty clear, and I think it's pretty clear why we've had this hearing today. I wanted to ask you, Director Clapper, a few things about just in general this Russian influence. When Director Comey was here last week, he said, I think that one of the lessons that the Russians may have drawn from this, he's talking about the election, the influence, is that this works. Those were Comey's words. Do you agree?
Absolutely, and as I said in my statement, the Russians have to be celebrating the success of what they set out to do with rather minimal resource expenditure. And the first objective was to sow discord and dissension, which they certainly did.
And when you look at this, in addition to the hacking into the DNC and Podesta's emails, all those things, we also had the fake news propaganda, which is referenced in the report. I believe it's $200 million. Is that all they spent in the scheme of things, something like that?
If that, which doesn't include government support to subsidies to RT.
And how does RT work when you look at the?
Well, RT is essentially a propaganda mouthpiece for the government, since the predominance of its funding comes from the government. The management is close to Putin, so it's a, as I say, I think a Russian governmental mouthpiece.
Ms. Yates, I'm asking you in your capacity as a former Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General, I'd ask this of Director Comey about the use of shell corporations. Now something like 50% of real estate deals over $5 million are now done with shell corporations. We're trying to push so that the Treasury Department puts more transparency. This is something that the European countries are working on right now. And I'm very concerned that this is another vehicle where money is laundered. I'm concerned about loopholes in our campaign finance laws as well. But could you address this just from your experience as a criminal prosecutor?
Sure, and those are all valid concerns. We're actually lagging behind other countries in the world, and we don't want to become a haven then, where you can have shell corporations that can be used for all sorts of nefarious purposes that can have national security implications as well as criminal implications.
Director Clapper, did you want to add anything to that? And again, this is why I believe an independent commission, in addition to the great work that's being done by this subcommittee and the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is so important, as well as the investigation, an independent commission would allow a panel of experts to go into the next election, go into 2020, where Director Comey had said, I expect to see them back in 2018 and especially 2020. Those are his words. Do you agree with that, Director?
Absolutely.
And that is why an independent commission would allow us to come up with some ideas on how we can stop this from happening again, whether it is how the media handle these things, how campaigns handle these things, how intelligence agencies, when they find out, handle these things, because we cannot allow foreign countries to influence our democracies. Do you agree, Director Clapper?
I certainly do, and I understand how critical leaks are and unmasking and all these ancillary issues. But to me, the transcendent issue here is the Russian interference in our election process and what that means to the erosion of the fundamental fabric of our democracy. And that, to me, is a huge deal. And they're going to continue to do it, and why not? It proved successful.
Thank you.
Until